It was Friday, the 11th of January, 2013, the day before my birthday. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. There was a light breeze blowing. And you could hear the sounds of birds singing. And I was really looking forward to the weekend and celebrating my birthday. And then the phone rang. I looked and I recognized the number. It was an important client. And we'd been playing one of those phone tennis things for about 24 hours. I decided to take the call. Now, it's been well researched and documented that most of our behavior takes place outside of our conscious awareness, beneath the surface. This is a very efficient use of the brain because we couldn't possibly process all the information coming at our senses in any given moment in time. Yet, at the same time, we cannot totally rely on our unconscious habitual responses to be able to navigate and respond to each and every situation that we encounter in our day-to-day lives. We need to develop something called situational awareness. In the words of Sir John Whitmore, the late Sir John Whitmore, one of the fathers of modern-day coaching, he said, "I am able to control only that which I am aware of. That which I am unaware of controls me." Awareness empowers me. At the same time, that's often not enough. We often have to have the ability to respond, or responsibility. And the resources we need to do that, they often lie beneath the surface. Now, we live today in an increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, what's known as VUCA. And it's so essential that each and every one of us, especially if we're leaders, develop the capacity to be able to respond to situations with the appropriate behaviors. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to introduce you to adaptive capacity, why you should develop it, what it is, and how you can go about it. But first, to be able to do that, I'm going to need your help. So I want everybody to stand up, please. Everybody stand up. We're going to do an exercise. Now, if anybody feels that they can't do the exercise, that's fine for whatever reason. But for those of you who can, please stand up. And I want you to just watch what I do and follow my instructions. Very simple. I want everybody to balance on their right leg. Stand and balance on your right leg. Okay? Now I want you to switch legs and stand and balance on your left leg. Okay. Now you can all sit down. Now some of you will have had the sensation, a different sensation in your right leg and your left leg. Some of you may have even been able to balance better on your right leg or your left leg. And for those of us who have the use of both legs, we know that using both legs helps us navigate the world better. A skillful footballer who has a reputation for having a gifted right foot or left foot can have great success on the football field until they encounter that defender who knows this and they start to block them. It can be very frustrating for that footballer. So what was an apparent strength in a certain context has now become a weakness. And we all have these blind spots where what appears to us in some contexts as a strength can often turn out to be a weakness in another context. So let me ask you all a question here. If you're a farmer, is rain a good or a bad thing? Hands up, all the economists in the room. Anybody studied economists? Okay. So you're probably going, it depends. Yes. Of course it depends. It depends on a lot of things. But it depends especially on the context and what that farmer is trying to do. A skilled and experienced farmer will know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And in fact, context is fundamental to our understanding of the world around us. Many philosophers would even argue that all meaning is context dependent. And yet, not all contexts are simple to navigate. Some of them present themselves as paradoxical situations. So, for example, if we're running an organization, should we make our organization decentralized or centralized? Should we go for stability or should we go for high growth? Should we go for a directive style of leadership and management or a supportive style of leadership and management? Or should we be focusing on the future or focus on the present? These don't present easy choices. And one way to think about them is through the act of breathing. We don't choose to breathe in or breathe out. We do both. So we need to breathe in to take in oxygen. We need to breathe out to expel carbon dioxide. Yet we're reminded of the famous saying by Abraham Maslow, who said, if you only have a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. And through my work, I still meet people who are running around with hammers. And guess what? In some contexts, that hammer works. But in other contexts, it doesn't. In fact, in those contexts, it may even make the situation worse. So at this stage you might be saying, what is adaptive capacity anyway? So adaptive capacity as a term has existed in the world of ecology for quite some time. But in the world of management and leadership, it started to become popular several decades ago. Professor Warren Bennis, when he went to update his seminal work, which is called On Becoming a Leader, 20 years later, he was reflecting on what had he learned in the intervening 20 years from the first edition on leaders and leadership. And he came to this conclusion. He said that the key competence that they should have is adaptive capacity. And he's not alone. Harvard professors, Ron Heifetz, Marty Linsky, working with Zander Grashow, identified as adaptive capacity as essential to adaptive leadership. So why don't we explore, with this very practical example, adaptive capacity. So hands up here who believes or thinks they're a really lousy communicator. Now, I don't expect many hands to go up on that one. We all think we're great communicators, don't we? Absolutely, right? So, let's look at delivering your message. So, meet person A. Person A believes they're a great communicator. They believe that communication is all about being forthright, direct, and to the point, about being frank. If you ask them about this, they say it's all about being honest, all about not beating about the bush, about saving time. Let's meet person B. Person B also believes they're really good a communicator, but they believe it's all about stating things in a tactful manner. If you ask them what they believe, they say, well, it's all about being polite, respectful, not offending people. So which one of these two people is the best communicator, I wonder? Well, actually, neither of them, because each of them has a version of Maslow's hammer. In some contexts, their preferred style will work, but in other contexts, it may not work for them. If they were able to combine those styles, they'd become better communicators. Some of you may be wondering, I wonder, could you measure this? Because if you can measure something, you can do something about it, isn't that right? You can do something about it. Well, as it happens, you can. About 20 years ago, a colleague of mine, Dr. Dan Harrison, developed a methodology called the paradox technology. And Many other colleagues, including myself and some other colleagues such as Rick Tate and Dr. Judy White in the United States, we've been working with this methodology in organizations to enable leaders and their teams to both discover, understand, and develop their adaptive capacity. So I'd like to show you how the measurement now works. Quite simple. So through an ingenious questionnaire, we capture some data. And what you see on this chart is you see a y-axis where we plot a person's preference for frankness or directness, and we see an x-axis where we plot their preference for diplomacy or being tactful. And what we see with this person is the little red dot up there plots in the top right-hand quadrant. What does this mean? This means that if the situation demands a more frank and direct style, this person can adapt to that situation and deliver frankness. If this situation that they encounter demands a more diplomatic or tactful style, this person can adapt their behavior and deliver that. And if the situation commands both styles, they can do that as well. They have what we call forthright diplomacy, balanced versatility, or oodles of adaptive capacity. Let's look at one more example. Who here has children? Put your hands up if you've got children. Okay, some of you. Hands up who here ever was a child. Okay. We sometimes call this next paradox the parenting paradox or the tough love paradox. Is it really necessary to be cruel, to be kind? That's what we say, isn't it? This person here, what we see, in business, by the way, we call this the coaching mindset or how we drive the performance of other people. This person, the red dot lands in the bottom right corner. This person has a preference for expressing warmth and empathy, positive feelings and affinity towards others. They're a really nice person. They're not so comfortable, they don't like to have to enforce rules or hold people accountable. In fact, some people might even perceive them as permissive, where you see the dot is. Yet, in many situations, the warmth and empathy, the positive feelings work really well for them. They're a really nice person to be around until they encounter a situation where that no longer works and they feel stressed. And we see this hurricane symbol up there in the top left quadrant. They can experience what's known as an amygdala hijack, an emotional flip response where they just can explode. And guess what? They're confused. And so is everybody else. Because all of this is happening beneath the surface. And now they're behaving, what we would say, out of character. Now, the good news is that if somebody is having this experience, through some coaching and training, we can help them develop their preference for enforcing rules and holding people accountable so that they can move up into that top right quadrant, become compassionate enforcers with balanced versatility and adaptive capacity. And the nice thing about this methodology is that Dr. Harrison has identified 12 contexts where it would be useful to have adaptive capacity. What level of adaptive capacity, if we look at the columns, do you have in the interpersonal context? What level of adaptive capacity do you have in an achievement context and in a leadership or an authority context? But equally, what level of adaptive capacity do you have when you go to initiate things, motivate yourself and others, implement things, or maintain things over time? I decided to take the call. The person on the other end of the line said to me, "You're out." I was like, what? I was shocked. Our biggest client had just told me that they were going to stop working with all small suppliers, including us. For the sake of the team, I thought, don't panic. Don't panic. It'll all work itself out. It's all going to be okay. Yet, 2 months later, with revenues drying up and costs and financial commitments still mounting, we were in free fall. This wasn't supposed to happen, I thought. This wasn't supposed to happen to us. We had worked with this client for 7 years, given them excellent service, and built great relationships. But it was real. It was really happening to us. A year later, I discovered how my own lack of adaptive capacity had probably contributed to the problem and our inability to deal with the situation. I stared at this graph here. I was operating from what could be described as partly blind optimism. What does that mean? I believed the future was going to be positive. It was all going to work itself out. If I had paid more attention to the potential pitfalls or what could go wrong, I might have been able to prevent or at least mitigate what had happened to us. It was a really tough lesson to learn. So I'd like to finish by saying there's always been change, and responding to change has always been a priority. But in today's VUCA world, the pace of change is accelerating rapidly. And we need to be able to respond to situations in the most appropriate way to prevent those situations controlling us. We need to be able to respond to situations with versatility. We need to be able to respond to situations with adaptive capacity. Yet most of this sits beneath the surface. So whether you're a leader, a team member, or simply a parent, discovering and developing what Warren Bennis described as the essential skill might just be what makes all the difference. Adaptive capacity changes everything. Thank you.